They expected the alien princess to flee. Instead, she led the war. Star systems whispered rumors of fleets burning in the black void, of colonies disappearing overnight, but no one expected the conflict to touch the heart of the empire so soon. The Avaran leadership had prepared for crises before, but nothing had prepared them for the sudden, terrifying speed of the invading armada. The humans, recently admitted into the Galactic Coalition, were stationed nearby for reconnaissance, and most of the aliens, including the Avaran generals, assumed that in the first moments of danger, tradition would hold. The royal family would flee, and the rest would fight. From the shadows, issuing orders and watching fleets burn from the safety of command ships. Princess Sarilith, third in line to the throne, had been taught all the rules of survival in her world. She was expected to flee when danger arrived, to hide behind her empire's strongest generals, and to let the experts handle what humans might call chaos. She had practiced the graceful exit 100 times in simulations and drills. Every noble in the empire knew the role of a princess in war was the same everywhere. Remain untouched, untouchable, and preserved. The humans did not yet understand how alien politics worked, nor did they care. They simply assumed that every noble would act like the ones in their history books, running when war came too close. Yet Sarilith did not run. When the first warning signals lit the displays on the bridge of the Resolute, she did not ask for a shuttle. She did not consult her closest aides about hiding in a distant station. She stepped forward, her hands brushing the cold metal rail, and looked at the human officers standing tensely around the main tactical display. Her dark eyes were sharp, alive with a clarity that surprised even the seasoned humans. "I will not leave," she said. Her voice was quiet but firm. It was not a question and it was not a request. The bridge fell into an uneasy silence. The humans had expected a fleeing princess, someone to be protected, shielded, and rushed to safety. They had not expected her to remain here among them at the edge of the galaxy with no backup, no escape plan. One of the human captains, a tall man with a face lined by years of combat, looked at her and frowned. "Princess, we can't let you stay here. This is dangerous. You need to evacuate immediately. We can't guarantee your safety." Sarilith shook her head. "I am aware of the danger. I am not afraid." There was a pause. Her words were simple, yet the certainty behind them carried weight. Humans had always been pragmatic, but they had never seen someone from the aristocracy, someone raised in safety and privilege, step into the heart of war without hesitation. They exchanged glances. Some admired her courage, others feared her recklessness. The enemy armada had already crossed the system's edge, entering hyperspace with terrifying precision. Reports came in from nearby sensors. Entire fleets were being annihilated before they could retreat, entire colonies erased without a trace. The Avaran coalition had relied on fear as a defense, assuming that if their leaders were alive, the rest would fight with more discipline. It was a calculation they had made hundreds of times before, and it had never failed. Until now. Sarilith moved closer to the holographic display, her hands tracing the lines of alien ships and human vessels scattered across the projection. She studied the formations, her mind racing faster than anyone around her could follow. Humans had always been underestimated in galactic politics, but she had studied them carefully. They were unpredictable, stubborn, and willing to fight beyond what seemed logical. The human's strategy might be the key to turning this battle around if she could adapt it to the coalition fleet. The humans around her whispered in low tones, debating tactics, trying to anticipate the enemy's next move. Sarilith listened, absorbing every word. Then she spoke and everyone paused again. "Move the ships closer. Don't wait to be attacked. Take the fight to them before they have a chance to target the civilian zones. Concentrate on speed and disruption, not honor or formation." The human captain blinked, clearly shocked. That's not standard protocol. No fleet has ever used that maneuver against them before. It's risky, almost suicidal. She met his eyes evenly. I am aware. But if we do nothing, billions will die and the coalition will collapse before the first shot is fully fired. Humans understand risk. I will follow your protocols but adapt them to survive. We cannot afford to lose here. Her words were like fire in the cold, calculated atmosphere of the bridge. Humans who were always wary of alien leaders found themselves inspired, unsure whether it was courage, insanity, or brilliance driving her resolve. But whatever it was, it commanded attention. The first strike came faster than expected. Enemy ships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formations, like predators surrounding a herd. Their weapons glowed with a light that could pierce even the strongest shields, and their speed was unmatched. Many of the coalition fleets panicked, retreating in chaos as alarms blared across every command deck. Ships were destroyed almost immediately, bursts of plasma tearing through armor and hull. The humans, however, held their positions, and Sarilith stood among them. She issued commands not from a distant throne, but from the front line, adapting, reacting, thinking faster than anyone had predicted. She pointed out weaknesses in the enemy's lines, suggested maneuvers that no traditional military manual would approve, and called for risks the generals of the coalition would never dare. By the time the first wave of attacks ended, the human and coalition fleets had suffered losses, but the enemy had been slowed, forced to adjust their tactics unexpectedly. Ships that were meant to strike with impunity had been damaged, and the enemy commanders began to suspect that their calculations were incomplete. They had expected fear. They had expected retreat. They had not expected leadership from someone they thought would run. Sarilith moved through the bridge, examining consoles, speaking briefly to engineers, officers, and pilots alike. She learned quickly which humans understood the strategy fully and which were still hesitant. She encouraged the cautious, praised the bold, and demanded clarity in decisions. Her presence was magnetic. People followed her not because she had authority in the traditional sense, but because she had vision and composure. Meanwhile, reports from colonies and outer settlements began to arrive. Panic was spreading among the civilian populations. The enemy was not just attacking fleets, they were targeting life itself, hoping to weaken morale. Sarilith listened carefully to these reports, her mind racing. She could have sent messages to her people to flee, to find safety in the inner systems, but she refused. She would not leave anyone behind. Prepare evacuations for civilians, she ordered, but do not abandon them to chaos. We will hold the lines. We will protect them as long as we can. The humans nodded silently. They understood her meaning. This was not a princess seeking glory. This was a leader, choosing to stand with those who could not defend themselves, willing to risk her life because she believed it mattered. As the day turned into night in the star system, the Resolute became the nerve center of resistance. Enemy waves continued to assault the coalition fleets, each strike more calculated, each movement more deadly. Yet Sarilith's decisions, guided by human pragmatism and alien insight, began to shape the course of the battle. Ships that would have been destroyed survived. Crews that would have panicked found calm under her direction. Every move, every choice, was a thread in a tapestry of survival being woven in real time. Even the alien generals, proud and experienced, found themselves questioning their old doctrines. They had fought wars for centuries, relying on rules, traditions, and fear. They had never imagined that a princess, young and untested, could make better decisions in the chaos of battle than seasoned commanders. Yet here she was, defying every expectation, challenging every assumption, and forcing the coalition to reconsider what leadership meant. As the first day of combat drew to a close, the fleets regrouped. The enemy withdrew temporarily to repair and reconsider, giving the coalition a moment to breathe. It was in this brief lull that Sarilith finally allowed herself a moment of reflection. She looked out into the void at the wreckage and the stars and felt the weight of what had just occurred. She had made no decisions lightly. Every order carried lives on the line. Every move could have meant the end for thousands. Yet she felt no fear, only determination. She knew the next waves would be worse. The enemy had seen her stand and would not stop until she fled, until they captured her alive. But she had made a choice. She would not run. And as long as she stood, humans and allies alike would see that courage was not limited to legends or heroes of old. It could be found in those willing to make impossible choices, willing to face annihilation, and willing to stand when everyone else expected them to hide. For the first time in her life, Princess Sarilith understood what it truly meant to lead, not to command from safety, but to take responsibility in the moments that mattered most. And as the stars glittered cold and distant above, she prepared for what she knew was only the beginning of a war that would test everything she believed about herself, about humanity, and about the universe. The morning after the first wave of attacks brought an eerie quiet to the coalition fleets. The enemy had pulled back temporarily, but every officer aboard the Resolute knew this was only a brief respite. The space between stars felt heavier now, charged with the tension of anticipation. Princess Sarilith moved across the bridge with the same calm determination as before, her eyes scanning tactical displays that pulsed with data. Humans and aliens alike followed her every move, some with admiration, others with disbelief. She reviewed the damage reports from the night's fighting. Several coalition ships had been destroyed, and some colonies had suffered attacks despite defensive measures. Yet the human crews had minimized losses where possible, demonstrating an efficiency that Sarilith found remarkable. It was not reckless bravery. It was a combination of adaptability, quick thinking, and an unwillingness to surrender to fear. She felt a deep respect for them growing inside her, a respect that would soon transform into trust and collaboration. The human captain approached her again, his expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Princess, we can't predict what the enemy will do next. Their speed and firepower are unmatched. Even with human tactics, we risk losing everything if we overextend." Sarilith nodded. "I am aware of the risk, but we cannot wait for them to choose the battlefield. We must force them to react to us. Humans survive by taking initiative, not by waiting for orders from fear." The captain hesitated, then nodded. Humans were used to commanders who acted decisively, but few had ever worked with an alien leader who understood their principles so clearly. The bridge crew began preparing for the second wave of enemy attacks, running drills and adjusting formations under Sarilith's direction. When the first enemy ships returned, they came in far larger numbers. They had regrouped, repaired damaged vessels, and modified their formations. This time, they aimed directly at the colonies that had barely survived the previous strikes. Their strategy was clear: terrorize civilians to weaken morale and force a retreat. The coalition fleets braced for impact, but Sarilith had already anticipated the attack. "Focus on disruption," she instructed, her voice calm yet commanding. "Do not engage in straight-line combat. Force them to divide their attention. Use speed, unpredictable movement, and concentrated counterattacks. Keep our civilians safe even if it costs ships. Do not hesitate." The humans moved with precision. Smaller fleets darted in and out of the enemy's line, drawing fire, and then retreating to lure them into vulnerable positions. Engineers on the Resolute adjusted shields and weapons in real time, guided by Sarilith's observations. She issued rapid orders, sometimes contradicting her previous commands, but always with a clear purpose. Each decision was calculated to exploit the enemy's weaknesses while minimizing unnecessary losses. As the battle unfolded, the alien generals around her began to see the difference between human-style tactics and their own. The humans did not fight for honor, prestige, or protocol. They fought to survive and to protect those who could not defend themselves. Their movements were unpredictable yet precise. Where traditional fleets followed rigid formations, human ships adapted continuously. They took risks the aliens would never consider, and yet, somehow, those risks worked. Sarilith observed a skirmish unfolding near a mining colony. A small enemy strike team had broken through the defensive perimeter and targeted civilians. Human ships responded immediately, moving to intercept with speed and coordination that even Sarilith found impressive. The aliens fought with precision, focusing on removing threats rather than indulging in displays of power. In minutes, the enemy vessels were neutralized, and the colony remained intact. She could feel the morale of the coalition rising. The humans' determination, combined with her leadership, had begun to shift the psychological balance. Where fear had dominated before, now confidence and resolve spread through the fleets. Sarilith realized that this was as important as any tactical maneuver. War was not only fought with weapons, it was also fought with spirit. And humans, she noted, had a spirit that the enemy could neither predict nor suppress. Hours passed, and the second wave of attacks continued. Sarilith remained on the bridge, issuing orders, observing movements, and adapting strategies. She noticed patterns in the enemy's behavior. Their attacks were relentless but predictable once studied carefully. They relied on overwhelming firepower and speed, assuming that fear would control their opponents. What they had not accounted for was the combination of human adaptability and her insight into their tactics. She made a bold decision. "Divide our fleet into 3 groups," she instructed. "The first will engage directly, drawing their main fire. The second will flank from above and below, striking weak points. The third will protect the civilians and respond to any unexpected maneuvers. Timing is crucial. We strike together, not separately." The human captain nodded, recognizing the brilliance in the plan despite the risk. "Understood, Princess. Coordinating 3 groups with this level of enemy fire will be difficult, but it could work." When the maneuver began, the enemy reacted predictably. They aimed to overwhelm the first group, confident that human and coalition ships would falter under pressure. But Sarilith's strategy was flawless. The first group drew the fire while the second group attacked from unexpected angles, disabling command ships and breaking enemy lines. The third group ensured that civilians remained protected, intercepting attacks that might have caused panic. The bridge of the Resolute was alive with activity. Communications channels buzzed with reports from hundreds of ships. Engineers and pilots worked with precision, guided by Sarilith's calm direction. For the first time in the conflict, the enemy's confidence wavered. Their attacks, once coordinated and terrifying, were now confused and reactive. Ships collided, formations broke, and retreat orders were given before the coalition even realized they had gained the upper hand. Amid the chaos, Sarilith noticed a small human pilot, barely out of training, performing maneuvers that no manual would have recommended. The young officer's instincts, guided by the confidence she inspired, allowed him to take out an enemy ship that had been targeting a critical civilian hub. She allowed herself a small smile. Humans did not just follow orders. They improvised brilliantly when given trust and responsibility. That was why they survived. That was why they inspired. As the battle continued, Sarilith's leadership began to influence more than just tactical decisions. Reports arrived from allied species across the coalition. Morale had shifted. Previously hesitant commanders were now following human tactics, trusting that the combination of bravery, speed, and precision could work against the overwhelming odds. Even species known for strict adherence to tradition began to adopt unexpected maneuvers, inspired by her example. Yet Sarilith knew the enemy would adapt as well. They would learn from their mistakes and become more dangerous with each encounter. The human captain, recognizing her thoughts, approached. "Princess, the enemy is learning fast. Their formations are changing. They're predicting some of our moves." She nodded. "Good, let them learn. Every adaptation they make can be countered." Humans survive not because they never make mistakes, but because they learn faster, adapt faster, and refuse to give up. That is what the enemy does not understand. Hours stretched into days. The coalition held its ground, repelling waves of attacks that would have shattered any less coordinated fleet. Sarilith continued to lead tirelessly, never leaving the bridge, always analyzing, always directing, always adapting. Sleep became a luxury, and yet her mind remained sharp, fueled by determination and the knowledge that billions depended on her. One day, during a particularly intense skirmish near a densely populated asteroid field, Sarilith made a decision that surprised everyone. The enemy had positioned a massive strike force to crush a critical supply hub. Traditional doctrine would have recommended retreat or waiting for reinforcements. Sarilith did neither. She ordered a direct assault, sending a small strike team of humans and coalition ships into the heart of the enemy formation. The risk was enormous. Failure could mean the loss of the hub and hundreds of lives. Yet the operation succeeded. The humans used their unique tactics, rapid movement, targeted strikes, and improvisation that the enemy could not predict. Critical enemy ships were disabled, and the supply hub remained intact. The success sent a wave of hope through the coalition, proving that even the most desperate situations could be turned with courage and ingenuity. Sarilith observed the aftermath with quiet satisfaction. Her leadership was not about glory. It was about survival, adaptation, and the ability to inspire others to reach beyond what they thought possible. The humans had taught her much, but she had also learned to integrate her alien understanding of strategy, timing, and resource management. Together, they had achieved something extraordinary. News of her actions began to spread across the coalition. Communications relayed messages of hope and admiration. An alien princess standing at the front of a war, fighting alongside humans, refusing to flee, and inspiring countless others to follow her example. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. Allies began to see humans not as a minor, unpredictable species, but as a force capable of changing the course of war. The enemy, meanwhile, began to whisper rumors of the strange princess who refused to run, who led battles with intelligence, courage, and a strange understanding of human tactics. Even as the coalition celebrated small victories, Sarilith knew the war was far from over. The enemy would return stronger and smarter, and each wave would test the limits of endurance, strategy, and leadership. But she also knew this. As long as she stood with the humans, as long as she learned from them and trusted them, the coalition had a chance. More than that, they could inspire fear and respect in their enemies not through brutality or tradition, but through courage, intelligence, and unity. And so, as the Resolute sailed through the void, patched and refueled, Sarilith prepared for the battles yet to come. Her eyes scanned the stars, calm and unwavering. Around her, humans and allies alike prepared to follow her into the heart of danger. They had seen what leadership could be when fear was set aside, when risk was managed with intelligence, and when courage inspired action. And they had seen that Princess Sarilith was unlike any leader the galaxy had known, unpredictable, brilliant, and unyielding. The second wave of the war had shown one undeniable truth. Survival did not belong to the strongest alone, nor to the most numerous, nor to those who hid behind protocol. It belonged to those who adapted, learned, and refused to give up. It belonged to humans. And it belonged to anyone brave enough to stand beside them. Princess Sarilith had chosen to stand, and in doing so, she had changed the battlefield, the coalition, and perhaps the entire galaxy. The war was far from over, but for the first time, hope was no longer a distant dream. It was alive, moving through the fleets, pulsing in the hearts of those who fought, and guiding the hands of a princess who refused to flee. The galaxy seemed to hold its breath. The battles had shifted from scattered skirmishes to large-scale confrontations, and Princess Sarilith had become the center of attention, not just for the coalition, but for the enemy as well. News of her leadership had spread across countless star systems. Allies whispered her name in awe, and enemy commanders grew wary. The stories that once painted humans as reckless and unpredictable now carried an added detail: the alien princess who stood with them, fearless and brilliant. The coalition fleets were gathering near the Epsilon sector, a cluster of star systems that contained vital supply routes, critical for maintaining the war effort. Intelligence suggested that the enemy would launch a concentrated attack here, aiming to cripple the coalition's logistical backbone. Sarilith stood on the bridge of the Resolute, her hands resting lightly on the railing as she studied the holographic display. Every ship, every formation, every possible movement of the enemy had to be accounted for. Lives and futures rested on the decisions she made in the coming hours. The humans moved efficiently around her, recalibrating weapons, adjusting shields, and preparing boarding teams for the inevitable enemy strikes. Sarilith had learned to trust them completely. Where aliens often hesitated or argued over protocol, the humans acted quickly and decisively. They were unorthodox, yes, but effective in ways the Avarin Empire's traditional fleets had never been. She smiled quietly to herself. These were not soldiers blindly following orders. They were thinkers, improvisers, and risk-takers, and they would be her greatest asset. The enemy arrived sooner than predicted. Thousands of ships emerged from hyperspace simultaneously, forming a deadly curtain of fire and metal. Their intent was obvious: overwhelm the coalition before it could fully prepare. Their weapons flared, sending brilliant streams of energy across the void. The coalition ships responded immediately, forming defensive patterns, but it was clear that brute force alone would not win this battle. "Divide the fleet into 4 groups," Sarilith instructed, her voice calm yet firm. 2 groups engage directly, drawing their main fire. 1 group will maneuver above and below, striking vulnerable points. The 4th protects civilians and supply ships. Timing is critical. We attack together. The humans nodded, adjusting their positions with practiced precision. Sarilith watched the enemy carefully, noting every deviation from expected patterns. Unlike other commanders, she did not rely on fear or intimidation. She relied on observation, logic, and adaptability, and humans responded to that approach better than any alien crew could. The first clash was chaotic but controlled. Ships fired in every direction, shields flared and melted under energy beams, and explosions lit the darkness like a twisted starfield. Coalition ships absorbed damage, and humans adapted instantly to shifting threats. Sarilith's strategies were not just orders, they were evolving plans, responding in real time to the enemy's movements. Amid the chaos, Sarilith noticed the enemy attempting a maneuver she had anticipated. A group of strike ships aimed to bypass the front line and target a civilian colony. She acted immediately. "Deploy the interceptors. Cut them off before they reach the colony. Use their speed against them. Don't hold back." Human pilots responded instantly, weaving through enemy fire with agility that the alien commanders had never seen. The enemy ships were destroyed or forced to retreat, and the colony remained untouched. Sarilith allowed herself a small smile. Humans did not rely on protocol. They relied on instinct guided by intelligence, and that instinct had saved countless lives today. As the battle raged, the princess moved through the bridge, speaking briefly to officers, analyzing reports, and making decisions with astonishing speed. Even seasoned alien generals who had fought countless wars found themselves following her lead. They had grown accustomed to rigid command structures and fear-driven obedience. Sarilith offered neither, and yet she commanded complete respect. It was a lesson the galaxy would not soon forget. Leadership was not about status or tradition, but about vision, courage, and the ability to inspire action. Hours passed. Enemy forces began to falter under the combined pressure of human tactics and Sarilith's strategic insight. Ships were damaged, formations broke, and morale among the enemy ranks started to waver. Sarilith noted the subtle shifts with a careful eye. She knew that even a moment of hesitation could turn the tide of the battle. Every decision mattered. Every movement counted. At one point, an enemy commander attempted a bold gamble. A large strike team aimed directly at the Resolute, hoping that killing the princess would shatter the coalition's morale. Alien generals around her froze, expecting panic, but Sarilith remained calm. "Prepare evasive maneuvers," she said simply. "Do not fire until they commit. Let them waste their strength." When the enemy ships approached, the humans executed a maneuver that seemed impossible. They split into smaller units, weaving around incoming fire, creating openings that allowed a coordinated counterattack. Enemy ships were disabled, their formation broken, and the threat to the Resolute eliminated. The bridge erupted in subdued cheers. The princess did not celebrate. She observed, analyzed, and prepared for the next wave. The victory, however, had consequences. Intelligence reports indicated that the enemy had suffered heavy losses and would soon adapt. They would learn from their mistakes, and the next battle would be even more dangerous. Sarilith knew that the coalition could not rely solely on brute force. They needed strategy, adaptability, and courage to survive the coming storms. Meanwhile, her actions had begun to change the perception of humans across the coalition. Messages arrived from commanders and officers. Humans were no longer seen as minor allies or unpredictable outsiders. They were respected, trusted, and in some cases, even feared. Their tactics, when combined with Sarilith's leadership, had proven capable of altering the course of a war. And the enemy, observing from afar, could not ignore the unusual combination of human ingenuity and alien strategy. Despite the ongoing conflict, there were moments of reflection. In the quiet hours between attacks, Sarilith walked the corridors of the Resolute, speaking with crew members, listening to their thoughts, and encouraging them. She knew that morale was as important as firepower. A fleet that believed in its leader and in its purpose could withstand nearly anything. And the humans, inspired by her courage, had begun to believe not just in survival, but in victory. The princess also began to understand the broader implications of her actions. Her decision to remain on the front lines had not only changed the tactics of this battle, but it had begun to reshape the coalition itself. Alien fleets that had once followed rigid orders were now adopting flexible strategies. Commanders who had been hesitant to act without explicit instructions were taking initiative. The war was no longer just about surviving the enemy. It was about transforming the way the coalition fought, thought, and led. One evening, as the stars shifted in the void outside the Resolute, Sarilith received a direct message from the coalition's central command. The words were simple, but their meaning was profound. The princess's leadership had inspired the formation of a specialized task force, combining humans and aliens trained in adaptive tactics. This task force would be deployed to critical battlefronts, serving as a model for the rest of the coalition. Sarilith allowed herself a rare moment of pride. She had not sought recognition or power, but the result of her choices was undeniable. She had changed the way war was being fought across the galaxy. Yet the princess remained vigilant. She knew that the enemy would not remain passive. They had already begun studying the humans' tactics, and future attacks would be designed to counter the strategies that had worked so well. Sarilith spent long hours reviewing enemy data, predicting potential maneuvers, and preparing contingencies. The humans, inspired by her confidence and foresight, followed her guidance with unwavering focus. Together, they became a force that was not easily intimidated, outmaneuvered, or defeated. As days turned into weeks, the coalition began to see the results of their combined efforts. Critical supply routes were defended successfully, civilian casualties were minimized, and enemy morale began to crumble. Ships that had been lost were replaced with new designs, incorporating the lessons learned from the humans' innovative tactics. Even the alien generals, who had initially doubted the effectiveness of her approach, admitted quietly among themselves that this was a new era of warfare, one that required intelligence, courage, and adaptability rather than mere firepower. Through it all, Sarilith remained a symbol. She was no longer just a princess. She was a leader, a strategist, and a beacon of hope. Her presence on the front lines reminded both allies and enemies that leadership was not measured by titles or traditions, but by the willingness to face danger, inspire courage, and make decisions when every choice carried immense risk. The humans, inspired by her example, continued to fight with unmatched resolve, proving time and again that survival was not a matter of luck, but of intelligence, bravery, and determination. One particularly intense battle tested the coalition's endurance like never before. The enemy, desperate to regain momentum, launched a coordinated strike across multiple star systems, targeting supply hubs, civilian colonies, and frontline fleets simultaneously. The coalition forces were stretched thin, and panic threatened to take hold. Sarilith remained on the bridge of the Resolute, analyzing data feeds, communicating with commanders across the fleets, and issuing orders with clarity and precision. Her plan was audacious. She divided the coalition forces into multiple groups, each assigned a critical objective. Humans led the most dangerous operations, relying on speed, flexibility, and improvisation to disrupt enemy formations. Alien fleets followed coordinated strategies that complemented human ingenuity, creating a synergy that overwhelmed the enemy at every turn. Ships moved with precision, attacks were executed flawlessly, and civilians were protected despite the chaos surrounding them. Hours passed in a blur of combat. Explosions lit the void, energy beams sliced through enemy hulls, and communications channels were filled with the sounds of coordination and determination. The enemy's confidence faltered as their strategies failed repeatedly. They could not predict the movements of humans guided by Sarilith's insight, nor could they anticipate the creative solutions that emerged in the heat of battle. By the end of the engagement, the enemy had suffered devastating losses. Several key commanders were eliminated, and critical supply lines remained intact. The coalition had not only survived, but had also gained a decisive advantage. Sarilith allowed herself a moment to breathe, observing the calm after the storm. She knew the victory was temporary, that future battles would test them further, but she also knew that they had proven something vital. Courage, intelligence, and adaptability could overcome even overwhelming odds. The princess's reputation grew. Across the galaxy, stories spread of the alien princess who refused to flee, who stood beside humans, and who led her forces with unmatched skill and bravery. Allies were inspired, and the enemy began to fear the combination of human ingenuity and her leadership. Sarilith had become more than a commander. She had become a symbol, a reminder that strength was not measured by numbers or firepower, but by courage, intelligence, and the ability to inspire others to rise above fear. And as the fleets regrouped, repaired, and prepared for the battles yet to come, Sarilith reflected on the journey so far. She had faced fear, chaos, and impossible odds, yet she had not wavered. She had led not from a throne or behind safety, but from the heart of the conflict itself. The humans had taught her lessons in adaptability and resilience, and she had integrated those lessons into her own leadership. Together, they had changed the course of the war and perhaps the future of the galaxy itself. The war was far from over, but the coalition had hope, courage, and unity on their side. Princess Saralith had shown that leadership was not about fleeing danger, but about standing firm, inspiring others, and making choices when every option carried risk. And in that determination, the galaxy saw a new path forward, one where humans, aliens, and leaders like Saralith could stand together, defy expectations, and face any threat with unwavering resolve. The galaxy was on edge. The battles had grown larger, more desperate, and more dangerous. Reports from distant sectors told of entire fleets clashing in blinding energy storms, of colonies struggling to survive under constant threat, and of enemy commanders growing increasingly ruthless. Yet Princess Saralith remained a calm, unwavering presence at the heart of the coalition's operations. Her eyes scanned the holographic displays aboard the Resolute, her mind moving faster than anyone else could follow. Every ship, every squadron, every maneuver had to be anticipated, and every decision she made could mean life or death for thousands. The enemy had learned from previous encounters. They adapted quickly, studying human tactics and predicting coalition responses. They were smarter, faster, and more dangerous than ever before. But Saralith had also learned. She understood the enemy's patterns, their weaknesses, and their fears. Most importantly, she understood the humans, how they thought, how they moved, and how they could turn impossible situations into victories. The coalition gathered in the Valter sector, a strategic nexus where multiple supply routes converged. Intelligence reports indicated that the enemy intended to deliver a crushing blow here, hoping to end the war with a single decisive strike. Fleet after fleet had been destroyed in previous attempts, and the stakes had never been higher. Saralith knew that if this battle failed, the galaxy would descend into chaos. Every commander understood the danger, but it was her presence that inspired calm focus rather than panic. "Prepare the formation," she ordered, her voice steady. "We will divide the fleet into 5 groups. The first will engage directly, drawing their fire. The second and third will flank from both above and below. The fourth protects civilians and supply ships. The fifth will move unpredictably, striking where the enemy least expects. Timing is crucial, we act as one." The human captain standing near her nodded. "Understood, Princess. It's risky, but it could work." Saralith allowed herself a small nod. "Risk is part of survival. Humans know this well. We will survive by adapting faster than they can predict, by acting when others hesitate, and by refusing to give up." As the enemy fleets emerged from hyperspace, the void of space was transformed into a battlefield of fire and metal. Ships collided, energy beams tore through shields, and explosions lit the darkness with terrifying brilliance. The coalition's initial movements were precise, coordinated, and adaptive. Human pilots led the charge, darting between enemy ships with incredible agility, striking vulnerable points, and retreating before the enemy could respond. Alien fleets followed carefully, supporting the humans' maneuvers while covering supply routes and civilian zones. Saralith's commands were constant, evolving with each second. She noticed enemy ships attempting to bypass defensive lines and immediately issued counterorders. "Divert the interceptors. Engage the flanking units before they reach the supply hub. Fire in bursts. Conserve energy for critical strikes." Human pilots executed her orders flawlessly. They were not merely following instructions. They were improvising, adapting, and anticipating moves in ways that even Saralith had not predicted. Every maneuver disrupted the enemy's carefully planned formations, causing confusion and forcing retreat where they had expected domination. The enemy commander, observing from a command ship near the rear of his fleet, realized too late that the coalition's response was unlike anything he had faced before. He had expected fear, hesitation, and protocol-driven obedience. Instead, he saw humans acting with brilliance and courage, guided by a princess who refused to flee, who led from the heart of danger rather than the safety of a distant throne. Despite the chaos, Sarilith noticed a critical opportunity. A cluster of enemy command ships was attempting to regroup behind a dense asteroid field, believing the natural terrain would protect them from direct assault. She acted immediately. "Prepare the strike teams. We attack now. Move through the asteroids, focus fire on the command ships. Use every maneuver at your disposal. They will not escape." Human crews responded instantly. Ships twisted and turned through the asteroid field, using its natural cover to approach enemy vessels from unexpected angles. Energy beams struck command ships precisely, disabling shields and destroying engines. Within minutes, the enemy's command structure was in disarray. Chaos spread through their fleet, and panic replaced the disciplined coordination they had relied upon for years. Sarilith allowed herself a moment of satisfaction but did not pause. She knew the enemy still had forces capable of devastating the coalition if underestimated. "Maintain focus," she instructed. "Do not celebrate until every threat is neutralized. We finish this together." The battle intensified further. Enemy forces attempted desperate maneuvers to regain control, launching massive waves of attacks aimed at supply hubs, civilian colonies, and critical fleet positions. The coalition responded with precision and determination. Human tactics continued to shine. Unexpected attacks, rapid adaptation, and coordinated strikes disrupted the enemy's plans at every turn. Alien commanders, initially skeptical of these unconventional strategies, began to follow them without hesitation, impressed by their effectiveness. Amid the battle, Sarilith observed a small group of human fighters performing an incredibly risky maneuver. They aimed to disable the enemy's energy core by approaching a heavily guarded ship from multiple angles simultaneously. The operation required perfect timing and flawless execution. She held her breath, knowing the slightest error could result in total failure. The humans succeeded. With coordinated precision, they struck the enemy's energy core, causing a catastrophic chain reaction. The enemy ship exploded in a blinding flash, scattering debris across the void and sending shockwaves through nearby vessels. This single act shifted the momentum of the battle dramatically. Enemy morale faltered, and their forces began to withdraw in disarray. Sarilith took advantage of the confusion. "Push forward. Strike while they are disorganized. Protect our civilians and supply lines, but do not allow them to regroup." The coalition moved as one, striking decisively at weakened enemy fleets. The humans led the charge, their courage and adaptability breaking through enemy defenses repeatedly. Aliens followed, providing support, coordination, and additional firepower. Within hours, the enemy's forces were shattered, their fleets scattered, and critical objectives secured. As the last enemy ships retreated into hyperspace, the coalition breathed a collective sigh of relief. The battle was over, and the galaxy had witnessed a decisive victory. Princess Sarilith stood on the bridge of the Resolute, observing the aftermath with calm determination. She knew the victory was significant, but she also knew that vigilance remained crucial. The enemy would adapt, and future threats were inevitable. Reports began to arrive from across the coalition. Supply routes were intact, civilian casualties were minimal, and morale among Allied fleets was higher than ever. Messages of admiration and respect flowed in from alien commanders, praising both the human crews and the princess's leadership. Even the most skeptical generals acknowledged the brilliance of her tactics and the inspiration she provided. Amid the celebrations, Sarilith reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. She had faced fear, chaos, and impossible odds. She had refused to flee, standing beside humans who had taught her the true meaning of courage, adaptability, and resilience. Together, they had transformed not only the course of the war, but the perception of humans across the galaxy. Her thoughts turned to the enemy. Despite the decisive victory, Sarilith knew that complacency could be deadly. The enemy had learned from their failures, and they would not give up easily. Future conflicts would require continued vigilance, intelligence, and creativity. She would continue to study their movements, anticipate their tactics, and prepare the coalition for whatever challenges lay ahead. The princess also understood the broader significance of her actions. She had shown that leadership was not defined by tradition or status, but by courage, intelligence, and the ability to inspire others. Humans, often underestimated and dismissed, had proven themselves as strategic thinkers, adaptive warriors, and sources of hope. Their contributions had changed the course of the war, and their partnership with Sarilith had demonstrated that unity between species could overcome even the greatest threats. The victory in the Valter sector became a turning point in the war. Enemy forces, weakened and demoralized, retreated to regroup, and the coalition seized the initiative. Allied fleets launched coordinated strikes across multiple sectors, reclaiming territory, securing supply lines, and protecting vulnerable colonies. Every action reinforced the effectiveness of human-inspired tactics, guided by Sarilith's leadership. Stories of the princess who refused to flee spread across the galaxy. She became a symbol of courage and inspiration, not just for humans or the coalition, but for every species fighting for survival. Her presence on the front lines, her calm decision-making under pressure, and her ability to unite diverse forces had reshaped the way war was understood and fought. She was no longer just a royal figure. She was a leader whose actions would influence generations to come. As the coalition fleets regrouped and repaired, Sarilith allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. She walked the corridors of the Resolute, speaking briefly with crew members, listening to their thoughts and offering encouragement. Humans and aliens alike admired her not for her title, but for her courage, insight, and willingness to stand beside them in the face of unimaginable danger. The war was far from over. Threats would arise, enemies would return, and challenges would continue. But the coalition had gained something invaluable: hope, unity, and the understanding that survival and victory depended not on fear or brute force, but on intelligence, adaptability, and courage. Princess Sarilith had shown that true leadership meant standing firm when others fled, inspiring others to rise above fear, and making difficult decisions with clarity and determination. Humans had demonstrated that ingenuity, bravery, and cooperation could overcome overwhelming odds. Together, they had changed the course of the war, and perhaps the future of the galaxy itself. And as the stars stretched endlessly beyond the Resolute, the princess looked toward the horizon, her gaze steady and unwavering. The battle was won, but the war would continue. She knew that challenges lay ahead, but she also knew that the coalition, guided by courage, intelligence, and unity, would face them together. The galaxy had witnessed a new kind of leadership, a leadership that refused to run, that embraced risk, that inspired others, and that understood the true power of courage. Princess Sarilith had become more than a symbol. She had become a legend, and humanity had proven itself as a force capable of shaping the fate of the stars. Victory had been achieved, not through fear or dominance, but through the combination of human ingenuity, adaptability, and the unyielding determination of a princess who refused to flee. The galaxy would never forget the day the humans fought beside her, and the day a princess led from the front, proving that courage, intelligence, and unity could overcome any enemy. The war was far from over, but hope, resilience, and inspiration now burned brighter than ever across the stars. And in that light, the galaxy glimpsed the future, a future where humans, guided by courage and determination, could stand as equals among the stars, shaping the destiny of the universe itself. They expected the alien princess to flee. Instead, she led the war.